Okay, yesterday we got into Enoch, the book of Enoch, the first book, and we talked about Hermon, which is the Mount Hermon that we say in English, where these angels who rebelled and mated with daughters of men came down, according to Enoch. I did not read this one passage I wanted to read from Enoch, which is a couple of verses here, because Enoch explains demons as being the spirits of this aberrant race, the giants. This is Enoch 15:8. Now the giants who have been born of spirit and of flesh shall be called upon the earth evil spirits, and on earth shall be their habitation. Evil spirits shall proceed from their flesh, because they were created from above. From the holy watchers was their beginning and primary foundation. Evil spirits shall they be upon the earth, and the spirits of the wicked shall they be called. The habitation of spirits of heaven shall be in heaven, but upon earth shall be the habitation of terrestrial spirits who are born on the earth. So that's interesting. I'm just giving you some info. I don't exactly know all the answers at all, but I'm just giving you some of the things to think about. I brought up Og of Bashan yesterday, Og of Bashan, with the long bedstead, who is obviously a giant, and it said he was descended from, what did it say? I can't remember if he was descended, if it says exactly descended from the giants, but I believe it did. Anyway, yeah, it says he was a remnant of the giants, according to Deuteronomy 3:11. Now that was Moses' time. That account of defeating Og of Bashan, who had this long bedstead, was during Moses' time. What were giants doing on the earth in Moses' time? Weren't they wiped out at the flood? I mean, I didn't bring that up, but I opened up a can of worms there by bringing in this giant in Moses' time. So I wanted to address that first thing this morning. Why were there still giants? And I'll show you from Joshua. Joshua fought the Anakim, the Rephaim. Those are all words for the descendants of the giants. So how did that happen? Well, one theory, which is I got from Michael Heiser in this book, The Unseen Realm, he says that more of the sons of God in that divine council around Elohim, around our God in heaven, those lesser gods, which we call angels, spirits, which are called gods in Psalm 82. Anyway, more of those rebelled after the flood and mated with women again. Now, I'm going to give you some of the examples of these post-flood giants. We know that, I wrote here, we know that those in Sodom and Gomorrah went after strange flesh. Now that's from Jude 7. And the context in Jude 7 was he had said, he was talking about the evil that's around. And he was saying, just like the angels who rebelled, God's going to punish evil. He said he's going to punish the angels who rebelled. They're locked up in chains of darkness. And he says, as Sodom and Gomorrah went after strange flesh. And he said I need to read that for you just a second. Jude 7. So I don't get it wrong. I'll start with 5. I want to remind you that you, though you once knew this, that the Lord, having saved the people of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not obey. The angels who didn't keep their proper domain but left their own abode, he's reserved an everlasting chains of darkness. As Sodom and Gomorrah, verse 7, and the cities around them in a similar manner to these, having given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh, are set forth as an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. So Sodom and Gomorrah was burned up. But I wanted you to see that. Who were these strange flesh that the Sodomites went after? I believe it was a race, this again, the remnant of these giants, this race. Okay, now there were Anakim in Joshua's time. Let's look at this. Numbers 13:33. This is a recap of Moses. This is a recap of the spies report that Moses sent out into the land. Verse 33 of Numbers 13 says, There we saw the giants. And he's talking about when we went out as spies. There we saw the giants, the descendants of Enoch. Came from the descendants of Enoch came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. And then we move on to Joshua. There's several references in Joshua, but I'm going to give you this one from Joshua 11, verse 21 and 22. Now he's talking about the northern conquest, the southern conquest that they made, when they entered the land under Joshua. Verse 21 says, At that time Joshua came and cut off the Anakim, Anakim, from the mountains, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, from all the mountains of Judah, and from all the mountains of Israel. Joshua utterly destroyed them with their cities. None of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel. They remained only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod. Now we've already seen that these Anakim were descendants of the giants. We saw that from Numbers a second ago, because that's when the spies went in, they saw these descendants of Anakim who were huge. Okay. Now we know also, as late as David's time, there were giants, right? We got Goliath. Oopsie, something fell off. We got giants, the giant Goliath, who was, somewhere it says he was a descendant of the Rephaim, which we saw yesterday. The Rephaim were another word for giant. And that's in Hebrew the word that is translated in our English Bible, giant. Anyway, we know that Goliath was around, even in David's time. So there were lots of, either there were more of the angels who rebelled, came down and mated with women again, or for some reason there were some survivors of the flood. Now I want to touch on the passage that I've been trying to get to with all of this background, which is Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9. Because this is going to have to do with why we see demonic activity in certain areas that we don't see in other areas, and why there is such a battle over the earth. Now, in Matthew 28:18, Jesus, before he ascended, said to his disciples, All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. We all know that passage, but I think it's going to mean more to us when we see some of these things in Deuteronomy 32. It says here, and this is Moses' song, right? Is it called the Song of Moses? He spoke in the hearing of the assembly of Israel the words of this song until they were ended. Yeah, this is Moses' song. Long chapter in Deuteronomy 32. It lasts, how many verses are there? 52. Now the song lasts for 43 verses. Anyway, he's going over the history, Moses is, which he does the whole book of Deuteronomy. But in verse 8, he says, When the Most High divided their inheritance to the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, which you could translate the sons of mankind, as far as Hebrew goes, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. This is the way my New King James reads. For the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the place of his inheritance. Now, I first saw this from the Michael Heiser book, but I have since seen it in a book on the Dead Sea Scrolls. That is, it's all these short writings in this book on the Dead Sea Scrolls from the Biblical Archaeological Review. I used to get that magazine. I like that stuff. And this article in here confirmed what I had read in Michael Heiser. It's fascinating. But Heiser says that there was an older manuscript, the oldest Hebrew manuscript we have of this Deuteronomy 32 passage, was written in a Herodian script, which was 1st century BC to a little bit over the 1st century AD. That time period is when they used the Herodian script. And this manuscript was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls for this Deuteronomy 32:8. And in that manuscript, instead of saying, according that the Lord set the boundaries of the peoples, when he separated the sons of mankind, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Then if we finished it, for the Lord's portion is his people, and Jacob is the place of his inheritance. So he set the boundaries according to the number of the sons of God. So, there's even a picture of this in this Dead Sea Scrolls book about the Dead Sea Scrolls. He even has a picture of it, and I read Hebrew, so I can see it there. It says B'nai Elohim for this passage, not B'nai Yisrael. So why do we have it Sons of Israel in our Bibles? Well, Heiser believes, maybe the people later had a problem with sons of God. That, only place we see sons of God would be in Psalm 82, Job 1. What's the other passage we saw sons of God? That's the only thing I can think of right now. Anyway, these sons of God who are around the throne of God in Job 1. And in Psalm 82. So the translators, the ones who wrote the Septuagint, actually put sons of God, Act 2. Now these were the ones who wrote the Septuagint were the Jews living in Alexandria, Egypt, because they didn't read Hebrew and they needed to write it in Greek. They didn't speak, I guess maybe they spoke Hebrew in Alexandria, Egypt, I'm not sure. But anyway, they translated it in the Septuagint, sons of God, also. But later, which is the manuscript that everybody goes by, that all our modern translations come from, the Masoretic text, which was written 300 A.D., I believe that's right. And they changed it to sons of Israel because they didn't get sons of God, and that sounded blasphemous. We're going to talk about this. But if God allotted the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God, and I see this as Michael Heiser does, it makes total sense to me, at the Tower of Babel, when men had already, Genesis 10, Genesis 6 was the flood, Genesis 10 we have this account of men building a ziggurat, which is a temple, trying to reach up to heaven, because they were worshiping false gods already. That God was not, upset that they were trying to build a tall tower and they were getting too smart. That was not it. They were worshiping. That's what you did if you built a ziggurat. And there's all kinds of archaeological evidence that that's what they were doing. They were worshiping false gods or demons. We know now. So, sorry. That God said, okay, you've fallen again. You've decided you want other gods. I'm going to assign you lesser gods to rule over you. Now, these were gods that had fallen, I believe, the fallen angels. He was going to give them territories on the earth. Because then he says, because the Lord's portion is his people, and Jacob is his inheritance. In the very next chapter, in chapter 12, he chooses Abraham. And he tells him what land he's going to give him. Now, it just makes a whole lot of sense when you look at these passages about God's presence being in a certain place, like Jacob at Bethel, naming it Bethel because he said, surely God is in this place. Whole lots of other passages. Anyway, I wanted to introduce this today. We'll get back into it a little bit more, a lot more, but I wanted to introduce that. That's where I'm going. That's why there's such a battle over, for instance, Israel. You know, that was given. God said, Jacob is the place of my inheritance. From Genesis 12. That's been reserved for Yahweh, for Elohim. But he actually legally gave, if this is true, if he actually legally gave the rest of the earth, the territories, to these lesser gods who rebelled, then now you've got the reason why we have to fight for territory. And why the enemy came to Christ in the wilderness and said, look, I've been given all this territory. If you want it, I'll give it to you if you worship me. You know, Satan was one of those fallen gods. I believe he was, pictured as a serpent, but he was a supernatural being around the throne of God. So he had perhaps been made the chief over all these other fallen gods, is why he had authority over all these other territories. You know, the ranks among the enemy's kingdom, there's tons of them, right? Oh, we're getting into a lot now, but anyway, that's the beginning of that. Bless you. Have a great day. Love y'all.